Welcome to LSM News. Today, we're discussing the UN Treaty Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction, or BBNJ, which has just entered into force on January 17th in 2026. The treaty creates a new legal framework to protect biodiversity in the high seas, which make up for nearly 2/3 of our ocean. These areas contain rich yet poorly understood ecosystems and have long been vulnerable to overexploitation due to limited regulation and the tragedy of the commons. To explore the policy, scientific importance, and implementation challenges of the BBNJ, joining us today are Kendra, representing government authorities, and Zining, who will share more about marine biology. As of now, 145 countries have signed the treaty and 85 have ratified it, making it legally binding for those countries. However, not all UN member states have joined. My question to the both of you is, why is it beneficial for individual countries to ratify the BBNJ?
Thank you for the question. From a government perspective, countries will want to sign the BBNJ agreement because for the first time, it provides a clear legal framework for conserving and sustainably using biodiversity in the high seas. That legal clarity promotes stability, reduces conflict, and also strengthens the rule of law in a global ocean governance. The agreement also enables coordinated conservation through tools such as marine protected areas, also known as MPAs, which helps countries meet existing biodiversity and sustainability commitments under frameworks like the Global Biodiversity Framework and SDG 14. Equally important is the treaty's emphasis on equity. It establishes dedicated financial mechanisms, including a special fund and support through the Global Environment Facility Trust Fund to assist developing states. Together with provisions on capacity building and the transfer of marine technology, the agreement enables countries to access funding and training so that they can participate meaningfully in research, monitoring, and decision-making. Finally, joining the treaty gives countries a stronger voice in shaping how it will be implemented. So for many governments, signing the BBNJ is not only about environmental protection, but it is also about securing access to resources, equitable participation, and securing a stable governance system for the ocean.
Similar to what Kendra said about funds, we biologists can stand to gain from the monetary benefit sharing of marine genetic resources, or MGRs, through a special trust fund. We can also benefit from non-monetary benefits, such as having access to samples or other scientific data. Access to MGRs and funding their research is important to better understand ocean health and their ecosystem functions. This has implications in taxonomy and conservation research in the microbial world. On top of that, such research can be used to make biotechnological advances, such as the utilization of multi-species microbial communities for biofuel production and the creation of new medicines, including anti-cancer agents. The establishment of MPAs are also beneficial from a biological perspective to regulate the impact of human activities on the oceans. When well managed, it can lead to spillover effects by boosting fish stocks near these protected zones, resulting in larger fish populations, greater biodiversity, and overall resilient ecosystems. The BBNJ will also be crucial to meet the global 30 by 30 goal, which aims to conserve 30% of the ocean by 2030. With what Xiamin has said about the high seas, having the BBNJ will play a huge role in closing the gap to achieve this target using legal mechanisms to protect these areas.
You both highlighted how the BBNJ helps protect marine ecosystems while supporting the resources that countries rely on. With rapid global changes, why is it important for the BBNJ to be implemented now?
As you all know, the oceans are home to many rich ecosystems that are still poorly understood, with 80% of the ocean being unexplored even today. However, just from the 20% explored, we have already discovered the countless benefits it brings in food, medicine, and climate regulation. This underscores the importance of preserving our oceans, especially given the increasing threats it faces. From a human activity aspect, one threat is from vessels that produce underwater noise pollution, affecting acoustic communication and navigation in marine animals. These vessels sometimes collide with marine animals too, which can be fatal for them. Overfishing is also a threat which causes ecological imbalance and therefore damages the function of the ocean ecosystem. About 30% of this is a result of illegal fishing due to poor regulation. If this demand for fish continues exceeding its supply, it can even lead to a marine ecosystem collapse. Regulation is therefore a key solution to managing these threats, and this is where the BBNJ comes in with stronger establishment mechanisms and more holistic approaches to conservation using MPAs and environmental impact assessments with a focus on the high seas. The BBNJ coming into effect now is crucial as our oceans are nearing their tipping points, which are critical thresholds that, when crossed, will lead to irreversible catastrophic changes. In fact, the first tipping point has already been reached. That is the widespread death of coral reefs, which are huge pillars of support to the marine ecosystem and global economy. The collapse of the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, or AMOC, is another tipping point that is being approached. This crucial network of ocean currents, when collapsed, could lead to disproportionate freezing and heating in different parts of the world, disrupting monsoon seasons and raising sea levels. Because of this, the BBNJ has to go into effect urgently to combat these threats before more tipping points are crossed.
Thank you. I fully agree that science shows the urgency that we have to take now. From a government standpoint, however, this is not only an environmental issue but also an economic and security one. The ocean underpins global trade, food security, energy supply, and millions of livelihoods. A substantial portion of global shipping routes and fisheries operate in or pass through the high seas. If these areas are poorly governed, the risk can translate into resource depletion, disputes over access, supply chain disruptions, and economic instability. For governments, that can directly affect national development and long-term economic resilience. At present, nearly 90% of MPAs are located within EEZs, and while progress has been made domestically, the high seas remain comparatively underprotected. This creates a governance gap. The BBNJ helps to close that gap by establishing common international standards and clearer procedures. For us, this provides predictability and consistency, which reduces regulatory fragmentation. On the question of why now, it is because technological capability and commercial interest in offshore resources are expanding rapidly, and without coordinated global standards, exploitation could outpace governance. Furthermore, if actions are delayed, it may constitute to higher future costs, be it economically or environmentally. That said, as the treaty is still nascent, implementation will require careful coordination, particularly in balancing new measures with existing rights and activities within EEZs. But precisely because of these complexities, a shared global framework is essential.
Yes, I agree. As human activities continue to intensify pressures on marine ecosystem, nature is struggling to keep pace. What other key challenges must the BBNJ overcome to ensure its long-term effectiveness?
That is an important question because while the BBNJ is ambitious, implementation from a government perspective is complex and far from straightforward. One key challenge is balancing conservation objectives with socio-economic realities. Measures like the MPA can impose restriction on human activities, which may affect communities that depend on marine resources for their livelihoods. Governments therefore have to manage potential competing interests while safeguarding food security, employment, and economic stability. This is why inclusive decision-making and financial support are critical. From our standpoint, without stakeholder engagement and targeted support, conservation measures risk losing social legitimacy and compliance, making them far more difficult and costly to enforce over the long term. Another challenge lies in recognizing the limits of what MPAs and the BBNJ can achieve on their own. While MPAs are effective in reducing direct human pressures, they cannot address broader drivers like climate change, ocean warming, or acidification. This means that the BBNJ must function alongside other environmental and climate frameworks rather than operate in isolation, making its success dependent on policy coherence across sectors and institutions. This is particularly evident in relation to seabed mining. Activities in the seabed fall under the mandate of the International Seabed Authority and not the BBNJ agreement. Without strong coordination, regulatory gaps where activities authorized under one regime may undermine conservation efforts pursued in another. Such fragmentation can complicate enforcement, which increases the risk of conflict between international obligations, weakening overall effectiveness.
Actually, Kendra raised a good point regarding the limitations of MPAs. Talking about climate change having impacts on entire ocean ecosystems just shows how interconnected our environment is, and this aspect of nature is kind of beyond our control. From a biological lens, climate change can also influence biodiversity distribution in our oceans by altering ocean chemistry and food webs. So to add on to that, while we can set clear boundaries for MPAs that we humans can follow, this does not mean that nature will abide by these boundaries too. Marine ecosystems are highly interconnected, and species will have to move to different habitats throughout their lifetime to meet their physiological needs. Examples are tuna and groupers, which are migratory fish that live in different areas from where they spawn. MPAs then have to be strategic about which part of the life cycle the protected areas benefit, as it will be difficult to ensure protection across all areas covered during their life cycle. Typically, the crucial areas to protect are when the species are most vulnerable, such as their spawning habitats. Though given the different spawning habitats of fish, it may be difficult to prioritize the areas to be protected, and sometimes only protecting a portion of their life cycle may not be enough to ensure their survival. Another difficulty brings me back to the point I mentioned in the beginning about 80% of the ocean being unexplored. A high proportion of these unexplored areas reside in the high seas. This means we don't have the baseline data to understand these ecosystems right now, which might pose difficulties in knowing if our protection measures are actually effective. As witnessed from other climate agreements, economic interests may ultimately constrain the level of protection implemented, even if they are necessary for the ecosystem to recover.
These challenges are significant, but they also highlight the work that must be done to make the BBNJ successful. Its implementation will require strong collaboration, accountability, and a commitment to balancing development with ecological integrity. Thank you both for your perspectives today. As we move forward, the BBNJ stands as a powerful reminder that conserving the ocean is essential to protecting our collective future. This has been LSM News, and thank you for watching.